think running nonprofits these days are so different from running nonprofits, a couple of years ago, because really they've been looked at now as businesses and not so much this, we have to raise money and we have nothing and, give us some stuff and resources. And I think it's really about marketing and messaging and content, and not so much about need, but more about impact. And I think for me, the motivator to really get involved in this space, coming from a really long career in fashion, was the narrative and being able to contribute and raise awareness and become part of a global dialogue. And I think nonprofits have a tendency to operate kind of on their own, and these are our metrics, and this is what we've accomplished, when really I think the big problem is there's so many resources out there and not enough people working together and not enough people coming together and sharing resources and ideas. And honestly, all of the problems of the world could pretty much be solved if we allocated our resources in different directions. So I think if there's one thing that I've learned, it's every day I wake up and my work is not my work. My work is what my heart is, and being able to contribute and to learn and to participate in the growth of humanity is extraordinary. I had been working in Kenya for a few years, and everything that we do is to put in basic human needs. So we're working with water and education and healthcare, and I had a proposition one day where an organization said, we want to put internet into your community. And I thought, this is crazy. These people don't have water. These people don't have access to things that they need to survive. How could we even contemplate putting in internet? So anyway, of the community that I work with, which is about 150,000 people over there, they're all on their phones and they're all friending me on Facebook. And I realize their need for connection is enormous. They may not have the same filter on friend requests as we all do, but we ended up putting in internet over there, and the way that we did so to make it more approachable for them was we shipped about 150,000 bottle caps over to Kenya. And we had the women come together for a design challenge. We split them into 3 groups. And instead of just building a basic, concrete slab and putting computers in it, they used the bottle caps to adorn the outside of the building to make it look like the iconic Maasai beadwork. And so now people travel from far away to come look at this building, and people on motorbikes stop and take a look at it. And I think that's the power, again, of having something as simple as what we look at as trash turn into something so beautiful and artistic that not only represents their culture, but the women who never get to participate in many things have this incredible bond and story that they were able to bring to life, that they're proud of, that they can walk by every day and feel that ownership of it. And it's extraordinary. And every time I go there, I'm just blown away, because you can see it, this little jewel box from far away on a hill, and it cost us nothing. And I think that's the power of just being creative and being resourceful and looking at things differently and thinking outside the box, and not just saying, well, we're going to put internet in. So I think the curiosity came more because people were first like, what is going on here? Then everybody came, and then they found out there was computers, and then it was more approachable. With my work with We Are Family Foundation, I've had the pleasure of being involved for the last 8 years, and we work with extraordinary youth from all over the world. I basically every day work with the 400 Malalas of the world, and to work in numerous countries with young people who are taking our new innovations and ideas and bringing it to the forefront and shaping this. I think I run a program called TEDxTeen, which is an independent license from the TED conference. And our talks have been viewed over 11 million times. And one of my speakers, Jacob Barnett, he's the world's youngest astrophysicist, studying under Stephen Hawking now, was diagnosed with autism at age 2 and told that he was never going to speak. And not only to be 17 years old now and have already graduated 2 degrees of college and have this extraordinary platform, but his mom said to us right after he took the stage, TEDxTeen and the experience of someone being told they would never speak, taking the stage to share their idea. That talk now has over 6 million views alone. It not only was a conversation that was to be had, but it actually shaped the dialogue around autism. When you're told that you're not going to be able to speak and society says autistic kids can't participate, that was a real teachable moment, I think, for all of us involved, that it really comes down to storytelling and the power of, no matter if you're nervous or uncomfortable or whatever, I always tell our speakers and our kids, just be you. And as much as you're you, that's what's going to come across, and that's what's going to, be the thing that gets you seen. So his talk continues to blow me away, and there's so many stories and so many young people that I work with that I could go on for hours. But that's just what it is with all the technology and storytelling devices and avenues that we have available to us these days. That's what it comes down to. I think technology has put us into this digital world, but it's that kind of analog and that personal relationship that you have to going on a journey with someone. So being able to watch those kids is the best part of my day. Working in Kenya for the past 10 years has taught me more than I could even begin to explain. But one thing that I've learned is perseverance. And when you have someone like Joseph Koye, who's my country director, who's one of my dearest friends on this planet, what he has overcome for his community without getting any compensation, just to be able to take them to the next level, because he knows the future depends on it, and that literally 150,000 people and their future depends on this one man. That opened my eyes. He expects nothing in return. There's no bone in his body that could possibly do any wrong, and I think just when you witness how much harder it is over there and how much they have to endure. It's funny, we brought him over here last year, and he said, I could never live in New York, it's so hard here. And we're like, what? But really, to be able to watch a community go through changes over the past decade and see how things are changing, I'm really big about preservation and making sure that their culture is still their culture, and that we're not infringing on their way of life, but rather helping them meet their basic human needs. He really has led that charge, and I think if there's one thing I've learned working over there, it's I know nothing. Every day I'm stripped of everything I think I know, and I think that's the most beautiful part of my journey over there is I'm a student, and I don't, as much as I'm very much rooted in the Kenyan culture, I don't live there. I don't pretend to think that I know everything there, and I really let them guide the way. So that was a big lesson for me, is just to really listen to the people on the ground and make sure that they're the ones running the charge. It's their community. Working with hundreds of young people who are shaping this world is extraordinary. I get to, I guess what I've learned the most is the power of community and the power of working together. And when I was in high school, we barely had the internet, didn't have email, weren't connected to the world unless your parents took you on a trip. And now I think there's just no borders, no boundaries. Everything is possible. There's nothing that can say no to you because you have everything at your fingertips. And I think I've noticed just that tenacity that I see in the younger generation, that everything is possible. And because the Mark Zuckerbergs and so on have set the kind of way forward that it's not necessarily education that's going to get you the success. It's like it's your own personal commitment and drive and desire to want to shape this world. And I think just, I get texts every day from these kids around the world, like asking me serious questions, but then I also get like, what should I wear to prom tonight? Or what should I do for this? And then I kind of get reminded that I'm not that age. But it keeps me young, being able to be tapped into the young movers and shakers, the ones that aren't doing it because they want to be featured in a magazine. They're doing it because they honestly, truly have been affected by something and want it to be different. And I think that's the thing that you have to have, is a connection to what you're doing. You don't do it because society tells you. Don't do it because you want to be a bold-faced name. Don't do it because your parents are, pushing you to be successful. Do it because you feel a connection. Do it because there's no way you couldn't wake up and not do it. And I'm fortunate enough to see that all over the world these days in the conversations I have. My dream for Under the Acacia actually is to finish raising funds. We have 300,000 more to go, and then I will never raise another penny ever again. I am very much about sustainability, and I think we set out with this case study with Under the Acacia that we wanted to make a community completely sustainable for generations to come, so they never have to rely on government or support from outside, that they could only rely on themselves, and that it would be a place that people would want to continue to live and create jobs and employment and raise their families in. And so once we finish raising the 300,000 and all of our implementation is finished, that community that we work with will net proceeds conservatively of $100,000 a year once all of their overhead is paid out, which for a nomadic tribe is unheard of. So once we're able to do all the metrics and get everything finalized, my plan with Under the Acacia is to make it more of an education model and use this case study for other organizations and other remote communities with the same filters that we have, and say, this is how you do it, this is how you can become sustainable, and this is what worked for us. And to me, it's more about the education and the awareness. Anyone can go and raise money and do this kind of thing. It doesn't need to be me. In fact, I don't want it to be me. I think the community has to have ownership, and they should be in charge of their own way forward. And so for me, it's bittersweet because I cannot wait until the end where I don't need to raise the funds. And I'm excited for us to finish the build out so that other communities can have the same access that where we work in Loida and Osoit has. And I feel very strongly that there should not be any remote community that does not have access to something as basic as water or education or healthcare. It's not even something that crosses my mind that we should be considering not figuring out in the next 10 years. So if I can play a little part of that with a little teeny nook in Kenya, and that hopefully will go further, and whether it's East Africa or Africa, I feel like I've contributed, and I feel very proud of what we've accomplished there. To be able to have the programs like 3.Dash, which is our incubator, TEDxTeen, which obviously everyone wants to be a speaker, but it's about the idea sharing platform of it. I think there's that other part of it, whether it's an app or some sort of social network that really hones in on connecting these younger entrepreneurs with the mentorship and with these big brands that we work with. And really, again, it comes down to community, and it comes down to connections and putting the right people in the right space. And if you have an idea and the right people around it, there's no limit to what can happen. So I think we're all about really the curation of, obviously the young person has the idea, but we're kind of putting the right people around it, getting the right messaging behind it, putting it right on the right platform, and then watching it light on fire. So for us, it's really more just figuring out what the way forward is that can not just be that kind of like small niche of the people who are already doing it, but finding the way to reach the ones that are not quite there. For my work in Kenya with Under the Acacia, obviously the number one thing that's going to get this done is the funding and finalizing our $300,000 to get us there so that implementation can be completed. But for me, I've always been very transparent and hosted many parties here in the States that the most important thing every single person can do is get on a plane and go to Kenya and spend your money, because their economy needs it desperately right now. And for every person that works in the tourism industry that's laid off, they support usually a family of 10 to 20 people. So the most important thing to continue to get their economy going and support what's going on over there in the magical country that it is to get on a plane and go see it yourself. Other than that, I think everybody at one point in their life, even though North, South, East, West Africa are all very, very different and distinct, it's a life changer, it's a game changer. And I know with a lot of people, for me especially, I got on a plane, I went to Kenya, as soon as my feet touched the soil, I was done, and I basically went home and quit my job. I don't expect everybody to do the same thing that I did, but the more that you travel, especially somewhere as far as that, and look at these nomadic cultures and understand humanity and where the world is at, not just here in this fast-paced environment that we live in the States, but that you can't help but go back a different person, and that completely changed my entire person when I got back here. The best way to support our work with We Are Family Foundation is if you are a nonprofit organization or an educational institution. We are always looking for eyes and ears on the ground all over the world to nominate our global teen leaders and our young people and bring them to our attention of the incredible work that they're doing, and to be coalition partners of ours to really understand the partnership and what it takes to elevate this generation. Also, just, I think, sharing the message, going on our TEDxTeen Talks, watching our talks, viewing our content, and getting involved and sharing these ideas and putting them out in the world is the only way that these ideas are going to turn into reality. You know, the more that people talk about them and make them real, the more people support them and get behind them. And I think that's when you start to see real things happen, and it comes out of the talk and into something tangible. I moved to New York City the day after high school graduation, and I remember I was always that young person that wanted to do more and be involved, and so I ended up doing lots of internships. This was in the late 90s, and I went to school for criminal justice and art history. I don't know. And I ended up, my dad knew someone working at New York Magazine and said, do you want to do this internship? And I ended up doing it, and they recommended me to be an intern at Betsey Johnson, the fashion designer. And I was doing that while going to school, and I remember I was 19 years old, and they asked me to basically run their public relations department. And I went to my parents and said, I've got this job opportunity, I need to leave school. And you know, back then it was like, you can't do anything without a college degree, and against everyone's wishes, I dropped out, and I basically went to work for this incredible fashion designer. And from there, I was producing fashion shows and traveling the world for Tom Ford and Gucci and Yves Saint Laurent, and I went on this long tenure kind of doing production and kind of behind the scenes, and all different kinds of random stuff. And then it was the end of my fashion career where I ended up at Vogue. I was director of special events, and where else can you go after you work at Vogue? And I ended up completely obsessed with wanting to be more involved in Africa. My aunt is a head nurse with Doctors Without Borders and has lived and worked in Africa for over 25 years, so Africa was always a big part of our conversation. But when I was at Vogue and I had known I was pretty tapped out, I pretty much marched into my boss's office and said, I'm going on a volunteer tourism trip to Kenya in a few weeks, and you know, that's what's happening. And she was like, okay, right before Fashion Week, this is probably not the best timing, but I knew I had already kind of had one foot out the door, and I literally got on the plane, stepped foot in Kenya, and I thought, this is it, I'm done. And 2 weeks later, I went back, I quit my job, and I basically packed up my apartment and moved over to Kenya and tried to experience it as much as I possibly could, to understand if that was a decision I needed to make. And then of going back and forth for many years between Kenya and New York, I had the pleasure of working for TED conferences and doing some consulting for the UN, and basically just completely changed my trajectory when I left Vogue, and got more into, obviously, just wanting to be a part of this world and understand more and be a learner. And my 12 years in fashion, I will always have a high regard for. I mean, the politics of Kenya are exactly the same as the politics at 4 Times Square, or what used to be Condé Nast there. And it did, logistics and politics and bureaucracy. And I think the most thing I was prepared for was, I have plan A, B, C, D, and when you work in Kenya, nothing goes as planned. So just that kind of preparedness of going with the flow, and that nothing's ever going to be the way you want it, and you can't plan, and just kind of say yes to everything. And that, I don't feel like I found my purpose. I feel like my purpose found me. Say yes to everything. Push your limits at all times. Push your comfort zone. If you're in a job that doesn't feel right, sign up to be involved with boards or extracurricular things that happen, after hours, or different kind of art exhibitions or entertainment things. Meet new networks of people. Travel as much as you possibly can. Go places that scare you. That I feel like is the only way that anything in this world makes even a little bit of sense, because the more that you push your limits, the more you discover about yourself, the more you learn about everybody else. And really, I feel like in my situation, that's what happened. It took me kind of getting to a place where I got on a plane, knew I needed to shift my entire world and shake it up, and went back a completely different person in only 2 weeks. And so I think if you're feeling like, I want more, then you're in a perfect situation, because that's the most important thing, is that you feel that inside that's driving you and pushing you, and then that just means you have to tap into it. But the most important thing is travel, see the world, and if you can't, then see everything in your own community and look for stones unturned and find purpose and meaning in everything. Because looking back, I think, now being in my late 30s, the things that I went through in my 20s where I thought this is so mundane, or why am I doing this task at work, or what is this really doing for me, those were the moments, looking back now, that actually defined who I was as a human being. So don't take for granted the things that don't seem exciting, because those are the things that shape you. I think there's so many events and things that we all attend, and when you think what makes something stand out, whether looking back at my career in fashion or the events that we do now in the social sector, regardless of budget, content is king, and emotional connection and drive. So, whether it's a certain performer or speaker, or some sort of painting, or some sort of conversation starter, you want to make sure that you connect, and that the people in your event have something to talk about, and not just about themselves. Take them out of their own experience and out of their own heads, and give them something to learn. I think the most important thing about being a leader is to make everyone around you better. I think the more that you can raise everybody else up, the better everything becomes. I think the more that you work smart and not hard, which is a lesson I had to learn, because I used to be like, I'm at the office till 4 a.m. I'm so great. But I could have probably done the job by 6. So I don't think it matters on hours so much, but on the excellence that you put into everything you do, and how you structure your time management. I also think the most important thing is have fun, and make sure that the people around you are having fun. Otherwise, what's the point? Obviously there's a time to be serious, and a time to bring a different feeling to the day, but the most important thing I've learned is it's also not so much about being a woman versus a man. I think it's just being a leader, period, and what you can do to elevate your circumstances, elevate your work, elevate the people around you, and elevate yourself. The most important thing, I think, looking back at my 20s, was I never really actually was like, am I doing the right thing? Is this the right decision? I kind of just went forward like a train that was really fast. I think that's something that everyone who knows me, like, kind of, oh yeah, like I always would call my mom and say, like, I wish I could just slow down. And she's like, no, you don't. That's who you are, and that's what you do. And I think I wish I could go back and say, when I was 21, I wished I did this differently, but I wouldn't change a thing, because every decision that you make is because that's the decision that you make, which brings you to who you are today. So just trust whatever decision that you're making, and trust, even if it feels like, why am I doing this? Or why would I not finish school? Or why would I take this job? Or just do it. And it's going to take you on this journey, and it doesn't need to be the end all be all. But looking back, all the wrong mistakes, all the right mistakes, all the things that I did, they're perfect. So just trust the decisions that you make.